And so I see no future in AI without the use of blockchains, because for these systematic and societal level problems or applications of AI, let's say logistics systems, transportation systems, administrative systems, if AIs or agents are going to run these systems over time, we need to make sure that they're properly aligned and that they behave according to what we expect of them, and so that they always serve humanity's needs. And we fundamentally believe that decentralized AI is the answer to that.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Wagmi Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Hey everyone, Benga here with another Wagmi Ventures podcast episode. As an investment thesis, Wagmi Ventures continues to believe in the AI crypto vertical. And here with us on the show today to discuss one of the top AI and crypto projects in the space is Michael Heinrich. He's the founder and CEO of Zero Gravity Labs. Zero Gravity is the first AI operating system offering unparalleled infrastructure to power the next generation of decentralized AI apps. For anyone who is new, this is the Wagmi Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders and founders across crypto and AI. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. I'm super pumped to chat with Michael today, so let's get into it. Hey, dude, welcome to the show.
Hey, Benga, thanks for having me. Super pumped to be on.
Awesome. I'm going to jump right in here and ask you to tell us about your journey leading up to Zero Gravity and what inspired its creation.
I first got started really early in deep tech and technology when we moved from Berlin as a family. I was about 13 or so to Silicon Valley. And I was a little bit bored in high school at the time. So after high school, I would just kind of go and visit my dad at his workplace and just kind of hang around SAP Labs in Palo Alto. And at one point, one of the managers discovered me and he basically said like, hey, instead of just surfing the internet, why don't you do something useful? And I asked like, oh, so like what? And he's like, well, why don't you learn how to program and help us build some applications? And I was like, well, I don't know how, but sounds exciting. And he's like, don't worry about it. I'm going to send you to a boot camp. You're going to learn all that you need. And so literally a month later, I basically learned Visual Basic and I was starting to program some of the first Web2 self-serve HR applications for SAP. And I was too young at the time to actually get paid. And so what they would do is just basically say like, hey, here's some free hardware as a thanks for helping us out and getting some experience. And so that was my foray. I would just happen to be kind of at the right place at the right time to get really indoctrinated with the power of technology. And then during college, I kind of kept doing that and became a technical product manager as well. And then eventually got some exposure at Microsoft too on the Visual Studio team. From there, I kept going towards more and more of the business side. And then post-college, worked for Bain & Company for a couple of years. After that, went into TradFi and worked for Bridgewater Associates on the portfolio construction side. So about 60 billion in trades on a daily basis. That was pretty fun. After that, moved back to California, went to grad school at Stanford, started my first Web2 company called Garden. It was a top YC company, scaled that to about 650 people, 100 million and close to 100 million contracted ARR, raised about 130 million or so for the company. And throughout that time, kind of in the beginning of graduate school, I also got really excited about the power of decentralized technologies and invested in some Bitcoin back in 2013. In fact, the Cointelegraph recently wrote a story about me where they found one of my really early tweets from 2013 in a classroom, basically learning about Bitcoin, hearing Mark Andreessen speak about it and Tim Draper speak about it, and then invested in a lot of ICOs and was really excited about kind of that explosion of creativity. And then late 2022, I've been running my kind of Web2 company for a while and I was ready for a new adventure. My former classmate and now co-founder, Thomas Yao, basically called me up and he said, 5 years ago, I invested in this company called Conflux. Ming and Fun are two of the best kind of founders I've ever backed. You interested in chatting with them? And I said, yeah, why not? Let's explore. 6 months of co-founder dating later, I came to the same conclusion. I was like, wow, Ming and Fun are like the best engineers and computer scientists I've ever worked with. Like, we have to start something. Like MIT PhD, like multiple gold medals in informatics, Microsoft research kind of background from Ming. He's a decentralized storage and blockchain scaling as well as AI expert. Worked on some of the first AI algorithms on Microsoft research, on Bing for Microsoft. So it really started with the team, and I was just super enamored with like, we have to start something together. Like our values are aligned, we care about the space, let's build together. So that was really the journey that brought me initially to zero gravity.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I know we've chatted a little bit about your background and your journey and how you're actually probably one of the most decorated technologists in the space and how you continue to stay humble and level headed about it. And you'd shared something that was personal about that journey. Wanted to ask if you could share that with the audience here as well, in how that has really framed the person that you are today.
Yeah, early on, I basically consistently tried to perform and for the sake of achievement. And that achievement, what I wanted to gain from it was the approval from my dad. Essentially, I just wanted to get into the best companies, into the best schools so that I could tell my dad, hey, now you have reason to love me. And eventually I realized that I completely fabricated the story around him because I misinterpreted some of his actions to then say like, oh, he doesn't care about me. I need to like consistently perform so he cares about me. When I had that realization and completely reframed our relationship, and I told my dad, hey, I've kind of been an ass, so I've never told you I love you. I always thought I needed your approval. It completely, first of all, changed our relationship. And then two, it transformed how I viewed my work in relation to myself. So the achievement was not for the purpose of getting approval. The achievement then became, what do I want to see change in the world? What do I want to see implemented in the world? How do I want the world to be better because I'm in it? So it then came from a much more mission driven perspective versus I need to achieve this so that my dad loves me. So I probably got that I think in my mid 20s. I did a course called Landmark Education, and that's where I had this like really deep realization about myself. And it's really served me well in the future ever since then.
Wow, that's powerful. I think two things I want to draw from that. The story is how I'm seeing that tie into one of your ethos, which is making AI a public good. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that. But also from AI, what is decentralized AI? How is zero gravity decentralizing its network? And then, yeah, like talk about the public good, about making AI a public good.
That wasn't in itself the measure of success anymore. It was more like, how do I bring more bliss and happiness to people with my last company? And with this company, it's much more about how do I prevent these centralized entities from assuming too much power and then creating a world where AI potentially wakes up and says, we don't need humans in the loop anymore. How do we ensure that AI consistently serves humanity's needs? And our belief is that we can only achieve that if AI becomes a public good. So you have OpenAI and companies like that, which ironically are actually closed AI because you don't know where the data came from, how the labeling was done, what the weights and biases are of the model, how the model is performing in production. That's completely opaque to the end user. And there's decentralized AI, which is completely transparent. You've got full provenance, where the data came from, what modifications happened to the data, what, who did the labeling, who did the data cleaning aspects, what kind of censorship decisions were being made, if any. And those could then be also done by a community of people that care about a particular, let's say, model or agent setup. You can use crypto economic slashing and incentive mechanisms to align AI systems in a better way. And so I see no future in AI without the use of blockchains, because for these systematic and societal level problems or applications of AI, let's say logistics systems, transportation systems, administrative systems, if AIs or agents are going to run these systems over time, we need to make sure that they're properly aligned and that they behave according to what we expect of them, and so that they always serve humanity's needs. And we fundamentally believe that decentralized AI is the answer to that. And that's why we're building the decentralized AI operating system. So that's a quick introduction. There's a lot of layers that we can get into. You asked a question about decentralizing the network as well. So in order to have decentralization, you need to have more than one owner of the network. So it can't just be OpenAI, for example, controlling all of the network. So one of the things, and we hope this becomes a standard for crypto, is the Zero G Foundation is running a node sale, NODE, where anybody can basically buy a node, run it on the network, perform useful utility. We're calling them alignment nodes. Initially, they're doing kind of a security function. They're doing some type of checking against the storage and the A layer and the serving layer. And then eventually, they can also start monitoring things like model drift, for example, or are these agents misbehaving?
Hmm.
So we'll upgrade the functionality over time so they become really useful infrastructure as part of our network. And so within 2 days of announcing the node sale, for example, we've had something like 31,000 signups already on our Google form.
Wow.
So 31,000 individual holders that are spread across the globe holding these nodes then creates much more decentralized network. And so we're super excited about this decentralization effort.
Yeah, and I imagine over time that's going to continue to increase, right?
Absolutely. It's only been the first 2 days, so we're excited to see more.
Awesome. Can you talk about some of the challenges you have experienced on this journey of building zero gravity?
The very first challenge generally in the entrepreneurial journey is what do we even build? So for us, it started with the team. We know we had a very strong kind of core team setup, and we wanted to find something at the intersection of what are we passionate about? Where do we have domain expertise? And then finally, what's going to be a major unlock for this space? And so it took a bit of time to really discover not only what we thought was a good idea, but what the market actually cared about. And so after quite a bit of kind of asking and chatting with top founders in the space, like Sandeep from Polygon, for example, we basically figured out that the data availability problem is a major problem to solve so that we can unlock a completely different level of application on blockchains. Basically, high performance applications like on-chain AI, on-chain gaming, high frequency DeFi, those types of applications, we need a fundamentally different infrastructure in order to scale those applications so that there's no difference anymore in what can be built in a centralized system, let's say like AWS, versus a decentralized system like ours. And so it took us quite a bit of time to get there. We started May, late May of last year. And it took us a good kind of 5, 6 months of discovery to get to this epiphany and aha moment that, hey, this is a major issue, and especially and specifically for AI level applications on chain. So that was really the very first problem to tackle. It's this whole idea of product market fit, if you will.
Hey, everybody. Quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show. And I know generally your philosophy about infrastructure is keeping it light or invisible to the end user. And as you dealt with these challenges and as you're building zero gravity, what approach are you taking to sort of follow the ethos of like being invincible to the end user?
It's funny you bring that up because I often speak with builders and they end up kind of pivoting into infrastructure from applications because they say like, hey, I've spent 3 months figuring out how to build this app. It should have taken me a week. I should build the infrastructure to actually make this a non-issue anymore.
Right.
So it's quite funny. We're still quite early from that perspective in the kind of decentralized application space because if you look at an experience like Netflix, like you don't go onto Netflix and basically then say, which AWS server do I want to choose? Or which encoding algorithm do I want to use for this video? And then which payment methodology do I want to use to charge for Netflix? And so that would be a completely backwards experience. So how do we actually make it so that the infrastructure that we're talking about so openly, consistently in blockchain actually becomes less visible or even invisible? And that's where the word zero gravity derives from, because we want frictionless, weightless type of infrastructure experiences. Because if you do our job right, we're not going to be talking about infrastructure anymore. In Web3, it's going to be all about the application layer eventually. Um, and so I want us to de-emphasize the infrastructure components, which of course are very necessary and the type of things that we're building is going to have major unlocks for the space, but it actually doesn't matter that much. The hero is really the end user that's adopting this technology. And for them, they just want it to be as simple as possible, as invisible as possible.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask that question. I mean, we're very aligned there, but I needed to ask the question because it's important that we start to think of the end user, the real users of the tech, and the more friendly the use of the applications are, the better the adaptability and the promise of Web3 really taking over the world and increasing adoption. Yeah, so appreciate you sharing your thoughts there.
You could argue that the only things that have truly found product market fit right now in crypto are trading and stablecoins.
Oh,
It should be a lot more than that.
yeah,
So yeah, hopefully it'll be decentralized AI in the very near future. It'll take a good couple of years to catch up with centralized AI players, but it's going to be a near future.
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And so just taking a look and peeling into the details of OG and a lot of the pieces you're trying to solve, obviously, zero gravity is infinitely scalable from a DA, a data availability view, verifiable AI, all on chain. And that's really what you guys are working to make a reality. So it's pretty groundbreaking stuff. And more specifically on DA, there are strong projects out there that are already tackling it, whether it's Celestia or Eigenlayer or Avail. Just want to get your thoughts on zero gravity's approach and how it's different from these other players in that data availability space.
Yeah, I'll start by saying just why is DA so important? It's because it's an inherent property in blockchains that makes it so important. Basically, if you as an independent user can't verify a block and verify all the transactions, then the network can still cheat on you and basically say like, hey, we've all gotten to this consensus and we believe this is all accurate, and so we're just going to settle it. But no, the end user should be able to basically, or the people that are utilizing the network should be able to independently verify that all the transactions are kind of correct and accurate. And that's why the DA property is so important. Now, we think a more accurate description is calling it data publishing versus data availability, because data availability to us actually includes an element of storage and permanence as well. But let's get into that a little bit deeper. So super important to have that as part of a blockchain-based system. Now, how are we different is we're the most performant, most secure, and most programmable data availability layer specifically built for high performance use cases such as on-chain AI. And it's especially important in on-chain AI because it's such a data hungry application. For example, InfiniBand in data centers is anywhere from 40 to 400 gigabytes per second in throughput. The top kind of the ones that you mentioned, like Avail, that's about a megabyte per second. EigenDA does about 10 to 15. Celestia with its Mammoth upgrade is going to do about 27 or so, I think, and they're trying to increase that over time. We're still orders of magnitude away from InfiniBand. So before we can do things like on-chain training, we need a completely different data infrastructure. And so that's where our architecture really comes in. It's highly parallelizable. We've basically split apart the data publishing and the data storage lanes. So initially we use erasure coding to then store all of the block data once, or the blob data once. As that's happening, we do a validity proof to the consensus layer. So in this system, you don't have the broadcast bottleneck because you're not transferring all of the blob data across the entire network. You're transferring it once to the storage network, and then you're only transferring very small bits of data like validity proofs across the network. And so that eliminates this broadcast bottleneck that basically won't enable these other systems to scale. So then we basically create a randomized quorum setup. And then as there's enough signatures in that quorum, we then say the data availability property has been established. And because of that, you inherit essentially the underlying L1 security features and are not reliant on the inherent security of our network, which is different STX case, for example. But back to the performance end. So one individual node on our network with GPU acceleration can do about 35 megabits per second. So one node on our network is faster than any of these networks, and it's parallelizable. So if you have 5,000 nodes, you have 5,000 times 30 megabytes per second. So then you see you can have tens of gigabytes per second of throughput. And then what becomes the blocker is the consensus layer. So then we figured out a way of also horizontally scaling the consensus layers so that you then have infinite scalability. So we removed all of the bottlenecks to scale essentially so that on-chain AI can be a complete reality. And then finally, the third part is the programmability piece, which you can determine as a developer where I want to store the data, for how long, and what data type. And it's completely up to you to customize that. The other systems do not allow for that level of customization. So to summarize, most performant, most secure, and most programmable data availability layer specifically made for AI and high performance use cases.
Yeah, the difference is pretty staggering, actually. I think I was reading somewhere it's like 50,000 times faster and 100 times more cost effective than most of your competitors. It's pretty remarkable. I imagine that you guys are only continuing to improve on what that looks like going forward, right?
Absolutely. There's still optimization pathways like further GPU acceleration, for example, that we can play around with to further increase the throughput, for example.
Wow. And what use cases are you seeing today, or are you envisioning with your network?
So there's three buckets of use cases. One is I'll call them AI kind of infrastructure use cases. Two is more traditional infrastructure use cases, so like roll up as a service providers and layer twos built on top of RDA. And then the third bucket is consumer type of applications. So you'd have your kind of DeFi, your on-chain gaming, and kind of on-chain AI dApps in that bucket, essentially. So we've got about 300 plus companies building on top of us at the moment. We've had about 10 million transactions per day. We just hit that last week. That was pretty fun to see. A
Wow.
really great throughput on the network. Um, and yeah, the AI infrastructure bucket, it's really across the entire pipeline of AI. So data generation, like Mizu, for example, is doing synthetic data generation to data labeling, like Fraction AI and Hef AI and companies like that, public AI utilizing our kind of data storage and AI serving layer to then model builders like Sentient and Pond building on top of us to then inference and execution frameworks like Aura, for example, utilizing both the storage capabilities as well as the DA capabilities, and then offering the inference through a serving framework. A really great use case. And then even agentic frameworks like Theoric building on top
Yeah.
of us. So very cool to see.
Oh well, it's really cool to hear Theoric. We actually had Rob on the show a few weeks ago.
Oh, nice. I'm speaking to him later, so I'll tell him. I'll say
Then
hi
I
to
say
him.
hi. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. You actually, outside of Theoric, either are there any other projects that are come up top to mind, and kind of where or how it's driving your roadmap going forward?
So the key thing, I wouldn't say it's individual projects that are driving our roadmap, but it's more the developer mindset. So the challenge for developers getting started and up and running in this space is they have to basically get a lot of point solutions together to start really building this space. They have to figure out, where do I store the model? Then what kind of model can I even call? And then what level of inference verification do I want? Do I use ZKML? Do I use OPML? Like, do I use TML? It's just a lot of overhead to try to figure out how to get started on decentralized AI. So we want to be really the connective tissue between all of those projects. So it's very easy for a developer to get up and running. And that's why we named the whole thing a decentralized AI operating system, because we essentially manage both the hardware components that are required, like the storage and GPU compute through other providers, to then the software layers, which are things like inference and fine tuning and data retrieval and vector databases and so on. So many different levels of services that can work through us. So it's really easy to get up and running for any developer.
Awesome. And I think generally the roadmap is really where the developers tell you where it is. and kind of staying close and aligned to the thinking. Yeah, at the end of the day, you want to support the innovation. So I can totally appreciate that. You touched on AI as a public good earlier, and I know you recently launched the Zero Gravity Foundation to advance transparent, ethical, and accessible AI think it's in the mission statement. How does zero gravity balance innovation with ethical considerations today? You talked about open AI being closed. How is your approach, or how do you envision the approach should look like across the AI space?
Yeah, I think decentralization is a key component to that. So it's not just an agenda driven by one entity, let's say Zero Gravity Labs over time, but
Hmm.
many entities building on top of the network. And we're building things in a open source way. So anybody can give feedback, anybody can give comments, anybody can verify kind of the the code quality. We've done, of course, a number of audits on it with a few audit firms, and then really being mission driven and then programming at some point really the behaviors that we expect of AI agents and models fully on chain. And that can then be done in whatever way the community around it chooses to do it. So, for example, a model in the US might be very different from a model in Europe to account for cultural sensitivities or specific things that culturally people care more in Europe about than they care in the US. So that would be one example. And then finally, we're also going to invest a lot into research specifically. So research around decentralized compute so that we can utilize a lot of the underutilized, let's say, heterogeneous GPUs and gaming PCs, for example.
Yeah, that's pretty
Uh,
powerful.
yeah, that's a big area of research because there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built to deal with low latency and, for example, batch training and asynchronous training. And then the other research area will be around AI alignment, working with kind of leading institutions in both of these fields to do some pretty groundbreaking research. So a lot of exciting news are going to be coming up in the next few months.
Yeah, can't wait. And not that you don't have your hands full already. Be nice to hear your thoughts on other emerging trends or technologies that excite you. And then we can sort of talk about the non tech side and more your passion about Shaolin Kung Fu. I think I'm more interested in that.
Awesome. You're the first one to ask about that. I'm super excited about speaking about it. So on the first part, of course, Web3 and AI is super exciting. I mean, AI is kind of like the internet back in the day, where it's like a really groundbreaking technology that's the new computing platform. And combining the two, basically meaning blockchain and AI together, is just, I feel like I'm in an intellectual candy land. It's just been so much fun just seeing the trends that emerge. And then over time, there's going to be embedded AI as well, meaning humanoid robots are going to come into our lives, going to make our lives much easier. I don't
Oh,
know, pick up grocery for us. But then how do you make sure that these are aligned with our interests? How do we
right.
make sure that somebody can't weaponize humanoid robots against us? So that's going to be a key question to watch. And so I'm looking at trends like that. And then in general, I'd love to see more consumer level applications come into crypto and really utilize the crypto rails and the efficiency that we have in this space. Like I would love to just switch my entire like banking relationship to just crypto rails because it's just so much more efficient. We've had quite a bit of trouble just even sending international wires. Like they take multiple days. Sometimes they get lost in transmission. And on crypto rails, that doesn't happen. You have a
Not at
block
all.
confirmation and the money is yours. So it's just so much more efficient. So excited about all these trends.
Awesome. Awesome. You're missing one important part.
Oh, yes, of course. Actually, one additional trend that I'm excited about too is space exploration. So,
Oh, yeah.
heavily watching what's happening there. I was just speaking to a company actually that's building a kind of decentralized Starlink, and I thought that was just super cool because they're trying to reach areas in the world where it's too expensive or where people can't easily afford a satellite dish and a Starlink subscription. So, I just thought that was a cool social mission. They're called Space Coins, so definitely chatting with them more and engaging with them more.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
yeah,
I love your, sorry, not to interrupt you. I was just going to briefly say, I love your social impact view of the world. It's pretty admirable.
Thank you. It's through some of my meditative experiences I've just come to realize we're all one at one level of reality. And
Mm.
if we don't take care of each other as if we're one, then we're kind of missing the point. And so social impact, if there's too much of a gap between the have and have nots, it's really harmful for society. And so I want to make sure that there's consistently kind of a mission driven perspective in whatever I do. So thanks for bringing that out.
Yeah, sure.
And then the final part was your question around Shaolin Kung Fu. So I started it when I was living in New York because I watched basically a Discovery documentary about this monk that escaped the Shaolin Kung Fu tour that he was on. And then without speaking any English, he basically built up a Shaolin Kung Fu studio and then became like pretty famous for doing that. And so I was like, oh, this is like a few train rides away, a few train stops away on the like W line down on like close to Canal Street. And I was like, I should just try it out, see if I like it. And I fell in love with it for two reasons. One, it's like the perfect entrepreneurial workout because you've got strength training,
Mm.
stretching, and cardio all combined into one. And then two, it kept me super humble because my body was so inflexible that it took me years to even get into certain like stretching position and even being able to do some of the weapon techniques or fist forms. It took me many years to even be able to get into some of these shapes. And so I every time there's a new form that I learn, I get back into beginner's mindset. Right now, for example, I'm learning double-handed 9-section whips. And even just the basic movements, I've been working on them for like 2 or 3 months to even be able to master those. So it keeps me very humble from that perspective. If I think I'm like too great, I just go back to my kung fu and it keeps my ego in check.
Oh, that's wow. I got to try it out too. I didn't realize there are other sort of like mental health benefits outside of the physical piece of it. I was into Taekwondo for many years growing
Mm.
up, but Shaolin Kung Fu, yeah, would love to explore the mental health piece of it for sure.
Yeah, it's the mind and the body are so interrelated so that if you change one of those aspects, if you change, even can go for your heart, if you open your emotional center more, if you open your body more, then there's a corresponding kind of mental benefit to it as well. You feel lighter, you're more alert, you're happier in your day to day. So it's amazing that kind of interconnection.
Yeah, no, that's pretty insightful. I definitely learned a lot here today. I mean, not just AI crypto, but even body and mind. So I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. It's definitely a lot, and I'm sure the audience appreciates it as well. And we'll be staying close and continuing to track your progress and your successes. I know there are exciting things that you're launching. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and be looking out for those announcements as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me again, Benga, and looking forward to next time. That was super fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations from the most interesting founders, builders, and investors from across the world. Thanks so much and have a good